Hey guys, how's it going? This is Watch, and in this video we'll be doing a direct comparison between the Canon 7D Mark II and the Nikon D7100. Here are what I consider to be the best crop sensor DSLR cameras that Canon has to offer and the best crop sensor camera that Nikon has to offer with the D7100. We're going to go through the ins and outs of each camera, specifically focusing on the image quality differences between the photos and video capabilities to see which one is best for you. Now physically, both these cameras are fairly similar in terms of overall dimensions and footprint. They're right between full-on professional DSLRs and more prosumer level DSLRs, so they're both very well built, made out of high tolerances. They're both weather sealed as well as dust resistant. The 7D Mark II weighs a little bit more at around 820 grams versus 765 grams on the D7100. They're both made out of magnesium alloy in terms of the chassis itself, so they're both pretty much equal in terms of overall build quality. Now in terms of the shutter actuations, you can get up to 200,000 cycles on the 7D Mark II versus about 150,000 on the D7100, but in most circumstances you're definitely going to get over those rated numbers. Now in terms of sensors, we have a fairly similar sensor size, basically both in the APS-C lineup of crop sensor DSLRs. In terms of megapixels, we do have higher megapixel count on the D7100, about 24.1 megapixels versus about 20.2 megapixel on the 7D Mark II. Furthermore, taking a look at the autofocusing systems on both cameras, we have 65 points that are all cross type on the 7D Mark II, definitely a lot better than the 51 points of the D7100, in which only 15 are cross type. The other interesting thing about the 7D is that it actually has a dual pixel technology in its CMOS sensor, so it has hybrid AF system in its live view mode, which is basically going to get you the ability to do phase detection autofocusing in live view, which is going to be excellent for not only photos but fantastic when you're shooting video, because you have probably one of the better and a more smoother autofocusing systems you're going to see in video mode. Now in terms of the burst mode, the 7D Mark II is kind of a beast in this category, getting about 10 frames per second versus about 6 frames per second on the D7100. So if you're a nature or sports photographer, the 7D is one of the best cameras you're going to find out there for that. Lastly, in terms of the overall viewfinder, we both have 100% coverage on both of the viewfinders, and in terms of the rear-facing screen, we do have a similar overall size. The D7100 has a little bit of a larger screen at about 3.2 inches versus about 3 inches. It's also a little bit higher resolution. However, I do like the color reproduction on the Canon screen a little bit better than the Nikon screen. Now let's go ahead and take a look at my side-by-side comparison of the different images I shot throughout the week using both these cameras, and that way you can determine which looks better to you. Now in terms of the color rendition of the stills capabilities, I think both cameras do a pretty good job of reproducing some pretty vibrant looking colors, and when you're shooting raw, you kind of bypass all the internal processing capabilities, and that way you have full control of the image. And I honestly think in terms of overall dynamic range, the Nikon is just a little bit better than what the Canon can offer based on some of my sample photos. The sharpness is also a little bit better on the Nikon as well. Aside from the higher resolution, I generally find that the images coming out of the Nikon 9 times out of 10 are just a tad bit sharper than what the Canon can deliver. Now the Canon has excellent autofocusing capabilities as well as a little bit better metering system, and we already talked about its 10 frames per second burst mode, so it's definitely better for more action oriented stuff. But if you're going in for more detailed kind of photography and things like that, looks like the Nikon just has a slight edge over the 7D Mark II. Now in terms of low light capabilities, since they're using the exact same sensor, I think it comes down to the internal processing capabilities. And when you're shooting JPEGs, the Digic 6 processor that's in the 7D Mark II is definitely doing an excellent job in terms of cleaning up most of the noise that you're going to find in ISO 3264 and 12800. I think now we finally have a proper competitor to the D7100, because last year's 70D didn't really quite stack up to what the D7100 could do in terms of low light. Now this kind of proves right now that if you want low light performance, you are going to have to pay a little bit on the Canon side, versus Nikon is really giving you a lot for your money based on the low light performance. Now, in terms of the video functionality, both cameras can do 1080p at fairly high frame rates. We can do full 60p in full 1080 in the Canon 7D versus about 60 interlaced on the D7100. So you're definitely going to see better slow motion capabilities on the 7D Mark II compared to the D7100 because it's recording at much higher bit rates. The other option is that we have intra-frame recording in the 7D Mark II versus there's quite a limited selection of different recording options, and the bit rate on the Canon is also a lot higher. Additionally, in terms of audio, we both have a external microphone connection as well as a headphone jack for monitoring, and both cameras have the option for manual audio level control for your microphone. So let's go ahead and take the time to actually look at some of the footage shot on the Canon and Nikon to see which one looks best. Now, after reviewing some of the footage shot on both cameras, I do have to conclude that the 7D Mark II definitely has better video capabilities, not only in terms of motion thanks to its higher inter-frame bitrate options, but overall the image does look a lot better in terms of overall color reproduction, sharpness, and dynamic range. Furthermore, in terms of the moire and aliasing issues, the D7100 is certainly a big culprit of that. It's definitely more in lines of what you saw in the first generation DSLR cameras versus Canon has done an excellent job in terms of alleviating many of those moire issues alongside maintaining a pretty sharp image. Now, in terms of low light, again, we do find pretty similar performance as we saw in the stills capabilities. Basically, both cameras are fairly good up to ISO 3200. At 6400, they are somewhat usable depending upon how important the actual image quality has to be on your particular project that you're working on. But generally speaking, 3200, they're really quite impressive looking. Now, after examining the footage a little bit more closely, I did overall realize that the 7D Mark II is a little bit cleaner in terms of overall ISO, especially if you crank ISOs past 3200, such as 6400 and 12800. I think the 7D Mark II does a better overall job in terms of maintaining a aesthetically good looking video footage that generally has pretty acceptable levels of noise with a good overall detail compared to the D7100. But on that, guys, that's really it. If you have any specific questions about anything I talked about in this video, please make sure to leave that on a comment down below. Make sure to give us a thumbs up if you like this video, and definitely let me know what you guys think of the overall comparison. Would you go for the 7D Mark II over the D7100? The D7100 definitely has a very competitive price point and a lot of different interesting features about that camera, especially when it comes to photos. But would you rather have the video capabilities of the 7D? Love to hear your thoughts and opinions. But again, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you later. Take care.